let's see if you guys can hear me now. Or not just me, but the game itself as well. Yeah, I gotta keep trying to find some of those. Sad Panda Park. Oh. All right. A single individual to actually share your life with? Oh, okay. I lived in an off grid cabin that had been in my family for years. When I was young, we used to visit every summer just to get away from it all. I'd probably call that ironic, but every time I say that word, someone tells me I'm using it wrong. Anyway, when the sickness started spreading, that cabin became a place to survive. It had everything a small family could need. Though, like I said, by this time I was the sole member of my bubble, I was used to taking care of myself. On a good day, with the sun shining onto the solar panels, I could get 30 kilowatt hours, more than enough to power the appliances in the house and keep the battery bank full. And since the cabin sat near the mountains, I'd often get a decent power level at night with the turbine catching the air coming off the ridge. But that night it was raining hard. Oh, your house is a mess. Oh, your house is a disaster. Oh, I hate my room's no room. I have no room to talk literally because my room's about the same. But I don't like it. I was thinking about how badly I wanted aliens to be real when an email alert danced in the corner of my screen. I opened it. Yet another forward from one of my more gullible work colleagues about a possible cure for the death-dealing virus. This particular claim apparently stemmed from a breakthrough in the study of bovine bodily function. Yeah, that's well played. That is definitely bovine bodily function. Ah, yeah, literally. Haha. I love it. I was pretty much the only company I had anymore, so yeah, I talked to myself. I deleted the email, letting out a heavy sigh. There was a point in time when I found that sort of thing amusing, the ridiculous conspiracy theories and clickbait titles, but now I just found them sad. I glanced at the clock, time for tea. I put the computer into sleep mode and headed into the kitchen. On my way there, I accidentally kicked a broomstick laying across the floor. Maybe that's why it's there. In that moment, I judged myself. Hard. Oh well, the world was basically ended. So what was the point of cleaning up? It wasn't like I was expecting company. I kicked the broom aside and carried on. In the kitchen, I steeped a nice big cup of herbal tea. Then I tossed my used tea bag into the compost bin, noting as I did that the bin was nearly full. I'd have to take it out soon, empty it into the tumbler with the rest of my food scraps and plant waste. Then probably in the spring, I'd add fresh compost to the garden, give my plants a healthy nutrient boost. I loved my plants. I wanted them to be strong in case they ever needed to defend the cabin from zombies or traveling salespeople. Smirking to myself, I stood in the kitchen and sipped my tea. The only sound was muffled rush of the rain outside, so peaceful. What was that? Was a scream. I am not prowling outside your house, thank you very much, and I don't prowl. I sneak. I appreciate the effort. I went to the window, peering out into the darkness and listening hard. You do. Yeah, then you definitely don't sound like some crazy old person. No need to become the crotchety old man that you're already becoming. I weighed my options. Let's definitely. Whoops! I don't think I selected anything. I pressed up on the D pad. I didn't know that immediately selected an option. Haunt away! Oh, that's why you're so self sufficient and like have something out in the middle of the world. Or out away from the rest of the world and have a garden and a compost bin and all that stuff. You're a hippie! Got it! I pulled open the door and stepped out onto the porch. The flashlight flickered pathetically. Luckily, all you need to power up a hand crank flashlight is hands, which I had. Hopefully, two of. I scanned the dark garden. Raindrops lit up as the light passed over them, and the trees and shrubs around the cabin swayed. All I could hear was wind and rain. A chill ran down my back. Yeah, you are. You're out there. All right, let's go back in. I turned to head back inside. A small voice stopped me in my tracks. Did you get stuck in like I don't know, maybe a wheel or something? Oh. I forced myself to step down off the porch to follow the path, until finally I was close enough to make out the shape of a person. As the weak flashlight beam illuminated more, I gasped. Whoever I'd been expecting to find, it certainly wasn't this delicate wisp of a girl. She was so pale she almost looked like a ghost. Even her hair, long and clinging to her face in the rain, shone bright, almost white in the glow of the flashlight. She crouched on her hands and knees in the mud as though she'd fallen. 100 questions raced through my head. Where did she come from? How long had she been out in the storm? Why wasn't she dressed for the rain? Was she lost? Was she sick? She is probably a ghost or some sort of supernatural being, honestly. The young woman squinted against the flashlight. That's what all people who steal say. Her voice quivered, which I thought was kind of dumb. After all, she was the interloper. It was me who should be freaking out, which I was. Really? You used sus. Okay. Her hands and feet are probably stuck in the mud. Crank the flashlight and help her up. All right, come on, let's go. Oh, that's a bear. Why do you have a bear trap on your? Oh. Somehow the girl had gotten her leg caught in one of my animal traps. Oh, it's rusted? She's gonna get tetanus. If she was sick, then I could get sick. But then I had no way of knowing whether or not she carried the virus, and right now she was hurt and trapped because of me. Well, she's gonna get sick. That's gonna get infected because you have a rusted bear trap clenched in her leg. Anything could happen. A hungry bear might come along. The weather could be turn freezing, and even if she did manage to get herself out of the trap, she would probably develop an infection fast in such a nasty wound. Yeah, this is your fault. We have to take responsibility and help her heal, regardless of the consequences. I stood up quickly and took a few steps back. For some reason, the girl was smiling at me. Didn't she understand that it was my stupid fault she'd gotten hurt? Well, The music is good, by the way. Like, I don't know if you guys can hear it yet, but this is very compelling music. Leaned in and grabbed my waist to use me as a crutch. Her words sent a chill down my spine. Touching, just the thought of it made me break out in a cold sweat. Ah, this is so well written. I no longer needed my flashlight, so I tucked it away and used the hand instead to help support the injured girl up the pathway. With my arm around her waist and her arm around my shoulder, it became very clear to me how small she really was. Small and delicate, like a folded paper crane, a soggy, limp paper crane in a drenched dress that clung to her shivering body. Oop, and a nail. Once we made it inside, I helped the stranger sit down on a wooden chair. I made a mental note to disinfect that chair later, and my clothes, maybe even the flashlight, but first aid. All my folders and internet tabs were a mess. No point fighting entropy. Oh, now I feel called out because my desktop's the same. All right, so we have a badly stocked first aid kit. And I washed my hands, pulled on some gloves and a face mask from an old box in the back, and brought everything over to the waiting girl. Good. That hopefully means no COVID. She didn't wince or complain at all. She was tougher than she looked. I was the opposite. I knew I looked mean even when I was. Why is there a hyphen there? I was the opposite. I knew I looked mean even when I wasn't trying, but on the inside I was basically a fluffy yellow duckling with anxiety. If our situation were reversed, and it was my leg all cut up like that, I'd probably have been a weepy wreck spouting rare and extravagant curse words. But she just sat there quietly watching. Was she joking? Way to draw attention to your looks, idiot. Not that I cared, really. It was just that I hadn't combed my hair in a few days or weeks. And I'd been living in the same set of clothes for a while now, a ratty old t-shirt with a rocket ship on the front and a pair of jeans that had long gone out of fashion. Hot, right? In another life, I might have felt self-conscious. Not about my teeth, though. Never about my teeth. Dentists were kind of a thing of the past, and since I wanted to keep my teeth for chewing purposes and whatnot, I was committed to practicing good oral hygiene. Alright, well, if you don't know what a doctor looks like, white hair, porcelain skin, angel feather hairpin, you've got to be, as cliche as it is, probably an angel or some sort of spiritual being. I wrapped a length of gauze around her narrow leg to hold the bandage in place. That's bleeding through pretty fast. She should probably have her leg elevated and maybe put some sort of tourniquet around her upper thigh to try and keep the blood flow stemmed. But a light tourniquet. And instantly forgot how to speak because suddenly I was struck by how pretty she was. She is pretty. I will give you that. 20, give or take, not too much younger than me. She was thin, but everyone was thin these days. With her, it was like she'd been built this way, small and delicate and weightless. Her dress was simple and a little threadbare. The rain had soaked through, and I realized I could sort of see her undergarments. I quickly averted my eyes, my cheeks warming. I hoped she hadn't noticed me looking. Yeah, she did, because her eyes have just closed in that picture. I did. I did say that. The room seemed to spin a little, and my face went from feeling very hot to feeling very cold. Stay away from each other, that was the rule. What was I supposed to do? It'll be okay if she stays. It is our fault. Just for the sense of guilt. She looked down into her lap. No. Her response made me too nervous to ask any further questions. I just wasn't sure I could handle a tragic backstory at that particular moment. In any case, I knew that if my parents were still around, they'd never have sent this girl back out into the night. They'd have let her stay, at least until she got her bearings. I sighed, giving in. She nodded and gently removed her leg from my lap. I moved back, making more space between us, and sat to examine the rip in my pant leg. Meanwhile, my brain tried to fathom what was happening. I'd brought a stranger into my house. I didn't know who she was or where she came from. This seemed like a bad idea and also a tad surreal. I got up and made even more space between us. She stood up too, testing her weight on her injured leg. No, no. Also, it was hard to think straight with her standing up in the very damp, very revealing dress. Hot in the face, I ran off to procure a basket of old clothes for my storage closet. I hadn't worn them since my teenage years. They were too small for me now, but might be a good fit for her. I dropped the basket on the table and walked backwards away from it. I watched her take the basket and hobble out of the room to change where I couldn't see. When she came back, I was surprised to see that she had chosen a button down that was part of my old school uniform from back before everything went online. Another thing that leads me to believe that she's some sort of angel or like heavenly being is the design, the character design. Her hair flares out in tips behind her back, emulating wings. I study game design. I would like to hope that I'm onto something, at least a little something. I'd been much younger and much smaller when I wore that shirt, but even still, it swam on her frame. It almost looked like a nightgown, which was probably why she had chosen it. For some reason, that made me a little sad. I myself had so few memories of the world before the sickness. It was hard to imagine not having any at all. That's a pretty name. I wonder if she's not less. Hmm, that's a thought. Maybe she's less angel and more swan because Mallory sounds like mallard, which is duck. Uh, and I've watched Princess Tutu. I know ducks become swans. That's a thing. That's an anime thing. We'll see which one of those two theories is right. I nodded as if to say I understood. It was true that there were things like wolves and coyotes in the area. That was why I'd set up an extra secure fence for my chickens. I stared at her, totally perplexed. Why the secrecy? Should I press for more? Let it go for now. I decided not to push it. It was all too much, and I really needed sleep. My toe was hurting where I stubbed it on the broom. I skirted around her to grab some blankets. I maintained a wide berth as I dropped them on the couch. I offered her a glass of water, pointed out the bathroom, asked if she needed anything, all from afar. I shuffled my feet awkwardly. Lovely pin-up pose. As I made my way up the stairs to my bedroom, I glanced back. Mallory was already curled up on the couch looking quite cozy. I couldn't remember the last time I'd had anyone in my home, even briefly. I'd been so careful for such a long time. I didn't know where she'd been, or if she'd been as careful as I was. But when my gaze fell on her bandaged leg, a prickle of guilt surged up. I finished climbing the stairs and flopped down on my bed. I was so exhausted, emotionally puzzled, and mentally drained, it didn't take long for me to fall deeply asleep. Chapter 3, Germination. The chapters are going by pretty fast, but I am thoroughly enjoying this game so far. This is hitting nice. I like it. And especially now that we can see, you know, this is probably how it's going to be once COVID fully takes root. I mean, we're on the Omicron variant. It's just going to keep going because we let it go too long, you know? I wonder if this is actually going to like be our future. I'm invested. See, one thing I love about I'm taking a little break here from the story. One thing I love about Sad Panda Studios and why I've been so enthralled with them is they really know how to build characters. They are like so they started off with Crush Crush, which is a dating sim game, an idle sim game on Congregate, and it's on the mobile now. They've got Hush Hush, which is another visual novel that they're working on. They've got Blush Blush, which is the male version. They know how to make characters, and I'm enthralled with them completely. To be perfectly honest, I missed out on an opportunity to write for them, but it's just that they are my be all end all game company. They are more important to me than Nintendo. I've got a long history with Crush Crush. I've been playing since the launch day on Congregate, so they mean the world to me. And this visual novel is it's compelling. It's inspiring me a lot to keep going with my game design degree and hopefully. Oh man, let's keep going. I digress. I woke, as usual, to the happy sound of a rooster crowing in the garden. The sky was clear and the early morning sun was bright and cheery. You'd think a morning like that would have put me in a great mood, but nope. All night my dreams had revolved around strange bugs infesting the cabin, hordes of them squirming inside through every crack. I must have been tense all night because my neck had a painful kink in it. I had definitely woken up on the proverbial wrong side of the bed. I suppose I'd forgotten about my house guest, or at least I hadn't remembered to think about her yet. I was busy making a list in my head of the work I needed to get done today. Is cleaning your cabin one of them? That's when the smoke alarm started shrieking. I bolted upright in bed. There was someone in my house, and I'd let her in. And yep, I could definitely smell something burning. I rushed to put on some real, daytime, clothes and barreled downstairs. Mallory stood in the kitchen looking mortified. A little smoke hung in the air, but I didn't see any flames. Phew. Grabbing a chair, I jumped up to silence the smoke alarm. I wasn't really listening to her. I was too busy creating space between us and also looking for the source of the smoke. There it was, a pan with a charred black mass sitting in it. I didn't know what she'd burned, but she'd really burned it. Well, seeing it's an electric stove with coils, coils are kind of tricky for me personally to use. I've used an electric flat top, and also gas ranges. I'm more preferential to gas ranges, really. but electric coils are tricky.
You know what? Forget I said that. It's all for a part. I'll just clean up my mess and then I'll make you a new batch. And I will definitely be more careful this time.
Hang on. Did you say potato pancakes?
They're the best. It's too bad this first batch didn't turn out because I spent all morning digging up the potatoes, washing them, peeling them. They were so took extra long, and I was worried you'd wake up before I could finish.
I don't think you dug up potatoes.
Luckily, I've got some other treats on the go as well, so you're not going to starve. Just let me turn on my toaster real quick.
She turned, reaching out for the toaster handle, but the microwave was running and the kettle was boiling,
Wait,
and
stop!
too late, she'd overloaded the solar panels, inverter. And just like that, the kettle, microwave, toaster, and kitchen lights all shut off.
Why did you do that?
Mallory, having plated the overdone pancakes for some reason, dropped the plate in alarm. It smashed, flinging shards of itself across the floor. The blackened pancakes bounced like rocks. Sad potato rocks.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to make you some breakfast. I didn't mean to cause so much trouble. I'll clean this up.
I sighed in frustration. All I had wanted was to make coffee and sit down at my computer just like every other morning. I couldn't do that now because I had to get the power sorted and check to make sure she hadn't completely destroyed my precious garden.
Are you angry with me?
How was I supposed to answer that? Be nice. I was definitely upset. I definitely didn't like the situation, but it wasn't like she intentionally ruined my potatoes. She'd only been so audacious as to dig them up without permission, long before they were ready, even after I had specifically told her not to touch anything. I looked away.
Just not a breakfast person.
I'm really sorry. I just wanted to do something nice as a thank you for letting me stay here. Promise, I'll fix everything and then I'll just get ready to leave.
Sure, whatever.
Rippin' potatoes, suffer through breakfast with Mallory. I turned away and went to haul on my work gloves and my boots.
I'll be out in the yard for a while.
I went out, and as I pulled the back door shut behind me, I heard a soft sound from the kitchen, like a heavy sigh or a stifled sob. Oh, what games are over there? Hold on. I don't recognize any of those boxes as anything that. Hold on. What is that one on the table? Die or it's probably Die or Truth or something like that. I don't know.
What did I get myself into? For real. I can't believe.
Well, your garden looks fine. I continued muttering grumpily to myself as I strode out into the garden. Then I took a deep breath of fresh, cold air. It had an autumn bite to it, but the sun was warm. I felt instantly calmer.
Oh well. She'll be gone soon anyway.
So I wonder how Sad Panda did this. Did they make an actual night version of the garden, or did they put a night filter over the day version of the garden and then a rain filter as an extra layer? I took my time that morning dealing with the power issue and making the usual rounds. Happy hens, check. Busy beehive, check. I did a rough count of the firewood in my shed, then made my way back around the front of the cabin. I stopped when I saw the bloody animal trap where Mallory had gotten hurt the night before. I felt pretty bad. The traps were only supposed to be wards, something to keep my bubble a little safer from dangerous wildlife. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I looked at the trap, wondering if I should rethink my setup. Leave it where it is. I decided to leave it. The traps were there for a reason, after all, and what had happened to Mallory was more of a freak accident than anything else. I knew where the traps were, and that was the most important thing. Anyone unfamiliar with them shouldn't be creeping around here anyway. Confident in my decision, I carried on walking down into the garden. Right away, I could see where Mallory had dug up at breakfast. I surveyed the overturned earth with a heavy heart, noticing a handful of small potatoes uprooted and abandoned. Well, I could always plant something new here. It was the right time of year for garlic. The sun had already climbed high into the sky, and I was feeling almost warm enough to peel off my sweater. I figured I should probably go inside, maybe eat something, check in on poor Mallory, and get to work on my computer. Right away, as I went inside and kicked off my boots, something didn't feel right. It took me a moment to realize everything was clean. There were no brooms on the floor, no garbage bags waiting to go out, no scattered crumbs of dust bunny cities. Everything looked so clean. It literally sparkled, but how and why? Had Mallory done all this just to make up for that little breakfast fiasco?
Whoa, this is really nice. Like, really, really nice.
And it's not that hard to keep that way as long as you put things back when you pick them up. As I looked around at all she had done, I started to feel like a bit of an ass. I figured I should apologize, but where was she? She hadn't left already, had she? Then I heard something coming from the bathroom, the sound of splashing water and a small voice humming a happy tune. My heart sank.
She couldn't. She wouldn't.
She's using your water. We stared at each other, both of us shocked at the end of my intrusion. Then my brain kicked back into gear and I tore my gaze away from her, but it was too late. I had seen everything, including the tub full of water.
What are you doing?
I was just taking a bath.
I don't think she realizes that you have limited water and limited electricity.
That's my water supply.
It's still warm if you want to use it.
That's my water supply. My fresh water. My drinking water. My everything water. What were you thinking? Why did you use so much?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea. I had no
Yeah,
idea.
you're living totally off the grid, which is a downside. That means very limited showers.
How do you survive this way? It's like you're constantly wasting things. Is this why you were out in the rain last night? Did your bubble decide to kick you out because you don't know how to think before you act?
Oh, that's mean. That's mean.
Just finish up in here. And don't drain that water, okay? I'll repurpose it for laundry or something.
Well, I mean, what you could do is you can use that water for laundry. You can use that water for maybe watering your, well, maybe not the food. Because it's going to be soapy, dirty water. That would contaminate your crops, honestly. I couldn't stop thinking about how naive, careless, and wasteful she was. Nothing to do with her shimmery eyes or how sweet she seemed to be even when everything else was horrible. Nope. The good news was I'd checked the rain barrels, and the situation wasn't as dire as I'd feared. As long as it rained again, sometime in the next few weeks would be okay. Still, I sat at my computer for a long time, entirely unable to focus on my work. When Mallory finally reappeared, she was holding the cardboard box of my old clothes. For some reason, she was still only wearing a bath towel. That made me feel all sorts of uncomfortable feelings, and I tried extra hard to keep my eyes on my computer screen. I pretended to type. I noticed the box had more clothing in it than before. I even saw some of my favorites peeking out. Haven't you had enough confrontation for one day? I doubted she could cause much trouble with a box of clothes. If anything, I should be questioning the simple fact that she was still in my house. Hadn't we agreed that she would leave in the morning? But I didn't say anything because, oddly enough, it was kind of nice having someone puttering around, making noise here and there, reminding me that I wasn't alone. It reminded me of my youth, or the summers I spent at the cabin with my family. Anyway, if she wanted to hang around and head out later in the day when there was less sun, that was her call, as long as she didn't wreck anything else. I hyper-focused on my screen, and in another couple of hours I still had nothing done. Suddenly it was dark out and I was starving, and Mallory still hadn't left. In fact, she was in the kitchen, and there were nice, savory smells wafting my way. I logged off and shut down my computer quickly, but casually, making my way over to her. I found her tending to 3 separate pots on the stove, all of them simmering and steaming pleasantly. How dare she? Nothing was burning this time either, which made me feel annoying feelings like impressed and kind of excited to eat that. Mallory noticed me standing there and smiled way too brightly.
Oh, good, you finished work?
Why are you still in a towel?
Supper is ready.
Why are you still in a towel? It has been 2 hours and you're in a towel.
Is all this?
I'm guessing 2 hours.
It's all made from freeze-dried proteins and grains I found in the pantry, and some spices, which, by the way, make all the difference when it comes to flavoring a dish. Oh, and I only used things that were already open, so I hope I didn't overstep again. I can tell you worked really hard, and I know I made a mess of things, and I just really wanted to make it up to you. I'm determined to have a net positive impact here.
You're adorable. She thought I'd been nice. I was suddenly very concerned about how low the bar was for her. I also couldn't help feeling a little charmed by her determination. I wanted to let her know what that I did actually appreciate her efforts.
Well, this does look incredible. And by the smell of it, I'm pretty sure I'll be licking these plates clean. Or, you did wash your hands before you started, right?
Yes, silly. And I still don't have any symptoms of any sicknesses either. So come on, let's eat. I want you to enjoy it while it's hot.
There was something so endearing in the simplicity of her delight. I smiled as I took my plate and sat down at the far end of the table, away from her. We ate in silence. The food really was delicious. I wouldn't have guessed she'd had it in her, not based on that morning. I wonder if I should try to get some answers out of her now, I thought and cleared my throat.
How's your leg feeling?
It's not too bad.
I should probably take a look at it after supper, clean it up, and put a fresh bandage on it. And then, I suppose we should talk about getting you home?
Right. Home.
Yeah, are we Princess Tutuing this? Am I shoving you in a lake? Or am I killing you and sending you off to heaven like an angel? Which one is it?
I mean, I don't know if you have a family or a group or whatever, or if you're on your own like me, but you don't exactly look like you, live in the forest. So where are you headed?
She lifted one shoulder, visibly uncertain.
Surely there must be someone, somewhere.
I'll figure something out.
Hang on, no. I want to make sure you're going to be okay.
I thought you just wanted me to leave.
Ideally, I'd like to know at least something about your situation. Maybe I could help you.
She looked away.
That's sweet of you, but I'm sorry. I'm just not ready to talk about it.
Okay.
We fell quiet once more, just the awkward scrape of forks on plates to fill the silence. I considered her as she sat across from me. So beautiful it was, as if she was a digital painting. Hmm. Hey, hey guys, wait. She is.
Can I just ask one more question? Why are you still wearing that towel?
She looked at me blankly. The last few morsels of food balanced on her fork fell back onto her plate. She glanced down at herself, then up again, hands clapping against the sides of her
What?
face.
You mean I've been wearing this the whole time?
You're an airhead.
I can't believe it. How do I forget these things? Oh, I'm so embarrassed. Oh my gosh.
I couldn't help laughing. I felt like I was finally catching on. She was a bit of a space case, that was all, and her mannerisms made it sort of adorable.
I'll be back to clean up as soon as I'm decent.
Her efforts to flee quickly were hampered by her leg. She ended up limping away in search of her clothes, mumbling exasperatedly under her breath. Exasperatedly? I'm not a huge fan of that word. That's hard to say. That's when it hit me. I hadn't even considered how much pain she must have been in as she cooked and cleaned and tried so hard to pay me back. Pay me back for what, though? I'd only wanted to help, and I hadn't even done a great job of it. And now I was trying to send her away, knowing full well she had nowhere to go. No, I couldn't do that. And now I felt like I had to make things up to her. I tidied up quickly from supper and returned to my computer where I booted up my 3D printer. I didn't use the thing often, but it was there for emergencies, and this seemed urgent enough. I managed to find a design that was close to what I'd imagined, and I set everything up and stood back to watch the printer do its thing. Just then, Mallory emerged wearing her dress.
Oh, you already cleaned up. I guess that's it then.
She stood beside the table, leaning on it for support. I stood in front of the printer while it worked. I didn't know what to say, so I decided just to let words come out of my mouth.
You should stay. Also, I'm sorry. I've been a total asshat to you.
Oh, I'm not the only one in the world who uses asshat. She looked up at me, nervously clutching the sides of her dress in her tiny hands. Her mouth opened and closed like she didn't know what to say either, so I just kept going.
It was kind of a shock to have you show up here. I haven't had anyone visit, ever, because this has always been my space, my family's space. I guess I felt sort of invaded. But now I realize that's stupid. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, I wouldn't feel right making you leave when you're clearly in a bad spot. I have the means to help you, and there's no reason why I shouldn't. If you want to leave, that's fine, but there's no rush. Cool?
She smiled softly, her eyes seeming to glitter. Behind me, the 3D printer finished its work. I turned around to take the sheet of gauze with the cute potato pattern I'd printed, hoping it would amuse her and lighten the mood.
Can I redress your leg now?
The pattern on the gauze made her giggle, and she nodded and sat down, propping her leg up. I prepared once again for the uncomfortable closeness that was necessary for the task. I scrubbed my hands, put on a mask and a pair of gloves, and went to sit by her with the first aid kit. We chatted idly as I cleaned and packed her wound. Afterwards, I got her set up on the couch and bid her good night. I wasn't exactly tired, but I figured it was better to leave things off on a pleasant note before things got awkward again. I climbed up to my stair. I climbed up the stairs to my loft and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling above me. I thought about how angry I'd been with her actions that morning. I thought about how scared and uncomfortable I'd felt throughout the day. How was it that now, a matter of hours later, I could feel such a gentle fondness for the very same person who'd made me so upset? Moody hermit, I accused myself. Yeah, you're probably right, I thought in reply. Oh, good, I'm also not the only person who has conversations with myself. And with that, I closed my eyes and waited for sleep. That was good. Okay, okay. I'm digging this so far. And I'm noticing a pattern that the chapters are basically flower and or plant related uh, terminology like germination, growth, seeds, etc. Okay, all right. I'm liking this. I'm liking this a lot. I slept soundly that night and woke up feeling surprisingly good. The sun was shining, my body and mind were refreshed. The sun is shining, the tank is clean. Hey, I could get used to this, thought my brain. I rolled my eyes at myself as I hopped out of bed. This was the start of a new routine. It had to be. Mallory was here now, and I didn't want either one of us taking advantage of the other. I wondered if she'd like to learn about the systems I had set up for off-grid living. I definitely needed her to understand why certain things were important, like conserving water, obviously, but she might actually enjoy being involved with the work I did on the daily. Maybe we could share the load. She could be my Sam to my Frodo. Aw, you guys even have potatoes with you, too. My heart felt kind of bright and big at the thought of having a friend, even if just for a while. It was something to break up the mind-numbing monotony of that sweet post-apocalyptic lifestyle I'd been living. Could be a, I could be an okay teacher. I taught a few online courses before for beginners wanting to learn C sharp. Teaching someone how to feed a chicken shouldn't be any harder than that. I treaded softly down the stairs and snuck into the kitchen. Some egg medley bubbled away in a skillet, and a pot of rice was boiling over. Mallory stood with her back to me, struggling to reach something high up in the cupboard.
Pot is boiling.
Oh, you surprised me. Good morning. How did you sleep?
She moved back to the stove to transfer the rice off the heat. Then she picked up the skillet and gave the eggs a good toss.
I slept okay. How about you?
She smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. I was about to ask whether you got the apron. It was my mother's apron, actually, and I was pleasantly surprised to see it. It had been tucked away in a bottom drawer and I'd forgotten about for a long time.
Great. Your couch is super comfy, and that blanket is so cozy and warm.
Good. I'm glad.
Don't get angry about the apron. Don't get angry about the apron. Please don't get angry about the apron.
Did you need something from up there?
yes, please. I was looking for aspirin and I thought I saw a bottle up there, but I couldn't really reach. I didn't want to risk standing up on a chair or something with my leg.
Is it getting more painful? I did notice a little redness yesterday, but I didn't think it was infected.
It's probably infected.
Unless. Wait, you're not feeling sick, are you?
No, it's just the leg. It's a bit achy.
I motioned for her to switch places with me, keeping some distance between us while I reached up and grabbed the aspirin bottle out of the cupboard. It was still half full, yet I hesitated a moment, reluctant to share my supply, but then I could order more, along with that first aid kit I needed to replace. I set the bottle on the counter and stepped away so Mallory could take it. She smiled so brightly that dimples appeared in her cheeks.
Thank you so much. You're the best.
I pressed my lips together, trying not to smile. We were still standing too close to one another. I took another few steps back, clearing my throat.
Maybe it's time for another temperature check. Just to be sure.
I went to grab the scanner and came back.
Could you, move your hair?
She lifted her bangs off the forehead so I could get a clear reading with the temperature scanner. After a few moments, the happy sound of the one beep let me know she was fever free.
Okay, you're good. But we should keep distancing until enough time has passed to know for sure.
Mallory nodded as she untied her apron. Then she did a little twirl on her good leg and offered me a plate.
How's this for a second attempt at breakfast?
Yeah, one thing to note is if I can make that. I've made that before, actually. I need to make that again. The food looked glorious. I knew the eggs were fresh because I'd collected them myself just a few days prior, but still, what she had done with them was beyond impressive. Ralph chopped vegetables and herbs gave splashes of color to the omelet, which was stuffed with steaming hot rice speckled with even more seasonings. The whole thing had a downright heavenly aroma. Omu rice. I need to send that to my partner. They will love that. I am certain. Oop, hang on. Kaede is big into Shakespeare. I think they will thoroughly enjoy that quote. Oh, give me a second. I got a cough pretty bad. I had to mute myself. Sorry about that. Oh, man. I thought to myself, you are a nerd.
Well, you seem to have learned how to use the stove properly.
She blushed. Oh no, I hoped I hadn't embarrassed her. I meant it as a jokey, complimenty thing. You've been alone too long, I said to my brain.
Really, this is amazing. I don't deserve it.
Second breakfast. Have a nice breakfast with Mallory. We enjoyed our breakfast at the dining room table, sitting across from each other just like the previous night. Through the great big windows at Mallory's back, the yard looked bright and inviting.
Looks like we'll have great weather today. I was thinking of doing some work in the garden for a while. A place like this needs a lot of maintenance. 10 acres of green space, all the off-grid systems. It's a constant running to-do list to keep everything going.
Seems pretty amazing. Is it hard to take care of it all by yourself?
It can be hard work, but it's worth it.
Well, what can I do to help?
I looked at her a little surprised. This one's a tough question. I don't want her leg getting infected, really. I mean, I'm glad she wants to help, but I want her leg to heal first. So this, can I save? Is there a save? More options. Yes, save. I think this is one of my first big choices.
You've done more than enough to help me. Anyway, with that injury, you should be resting more than anything else. I have lots of books on the shelf over there if you want to just sit and read for a bit while I'm working.
I'd much rather be outside enjoying the nice weather.
That's fair, but I'm just concerned that, you know, if you if your leg gets infected, that could give you a fever. That'll give Miss a false positive on the virus, and then he'll probably get angry and throw you out.
Sure, you can totally sit on the porch and read a book.
Or I could come with you. You could teach me all about how you live off the land. And we should get to know each other at least a little bit, shouldn't we?
She had a point. It had already crossed my mind that I should acquaint her with the property and the way did things, I conceded.
Alright then, I guess you'll join me.
I had to put the you need to be first option. I that's how I do. That's me. You know, I'm. That's just me. I thought about insisting we both mask up if we were going to be spending the day in close proximity, but I thought about it some more, and since we'd be outside with lots of space all around, and since neither of us had any symptoms, I imagined it would be fine. As we headed outside, I offered Mallory a jacket. She declined. I was skeptical that she'd be warm enough in her threadbare dress, but it was her call. At least the sun was warm today, and there wasn't much wind. I let Mallory lead the way through the garden. She would stop to examine all the different growing things, all the fruits and vegetables, more than enough for one person. I often had an overabundance of produce, so I would end up canning a lot of it. Except for those potatoes. Rip.
Oh my gosh, are these strawberries?
There she stood in the strawberry patch, a look of total wonderment on her face.
They look so plump and juicy, and they're so red. How did you grow them?
They're actually the easiest thing to maintain around here. They grow like weeds. Pretty much every year I get 3 whole harvests out of this patch.
Really? What do you do with all of them?
I make my own jams, put them in salads,
I would
smoothies.
love my own vegetable and
I make
fruit
healthy
garden.
stuff for easy snacking too. But I think they're best right off the bush. You're welcome to have some.
I honestly couldn't do it because I've got a black thumb, and I'm so I'm sure I've said this on stream before, but her eyes widened. They were huge, and they were actually twinkling now. How did she do that?
I've never eaten a strawberry before. Are you sure?
You definitely have to be some sort of celestial being. Um, what I was saying is my family and friends have this funny little nickname for me because I can't keep plants alive, but I can bring them back from the dead. So they have dubbed me the Necroplancer, and I thoroughly enjoy that nickname.
Never? Jeez. Yeah, help yourself. Just put your index finger and thumb right behind the stem and pinch it off.
I watched her reach out in search of the perfect strawberry to pluck.
Watch out for slugs.
She paused, stuck her tongue out at me in jest, and selected her perfect first strawberry.
Oh, wow. These taste just like sunshine. I could eat these every day.
Feast away.
I couldn't help but want to offer her everything just then. The happiness radiating off her was like addictive or something.
Oh, look. This one's shaped like a heart. Oh, this one here is huge. Look how shiny and red it is. It's like something out of a picture book. Oh, there's a little bug munching on that one. Enjoy your meal, little bug.
I smiled to myself while Mallory chatted away. Eating strawberries by the handful, I picked up my rake and started taking care of the fallen leaves that were encroaching on the garden. Mallory noticed and came over.
Can I do that?
Her smile was brighter than the sky above us.
No, that's okay. You need to go easy on your leg.
My leg feels fine. Please?
She just looked so earnest. Reluctantly, I passed her the rake. While Mallory took care of the raking, I made my way to the other end of the garden where I worked at pulling up weeds. Pretty soon, I had a bucket almost filled. When I looked around for Mallory, I saw her standing beside her leaf pile in progress, pausing to catch her breath. I felt bad for letting her take on the raking. She'd probably end up feeling pretty sore afterwards. Still, it was nice to have help. I could already tell that the chores would go quicker this way. I watched her until she'd finished her little break and gone back to raking, or rather, until she spotted me, looking at her and gave me a big thumbs up, which I pretended I hadn't seen.
Pulling up weeds.
I shook my head at myself, tossing another fistful of leafy stalks into the bucket. Something about this girl stirred up my insides. She was like a cartoon princess, too happy and determined, almost too good to be real. She's probably not. I, for one, definitely wouldn't have been tough enough to pick up a rake with a leg injury like that. If anything, I'd have sat on my couch playing video games until I'd healed. So, guess I felt a feeling that was partway between admiration and total bewilderment. Because there Mallory was, her pale skin glistening as she did my yard work for me, her dress swaying and dancing around her thighs as she moved. Wait, am I still looking at her? I thought I went back to weeding. I had to put an end to this distraction. It looked like Mallory was just about finished anyway, so I carried my bucket over to her.
Looking good. Work. Good work. Let's move all this stuff into the compost bin.
Okay. What's that?
I showed her the bin, and as we filled it up with weeds and old leaves, I gave her the rundown.
Basically, I put all the dead plant matter and vegetable waste I have into the tumbler. Since it's a sealed container, it traps lots of heat inside and helps the stuff break down. See the handle on the side? I use that to turn the tumbler so everything gets mixed together. Then, once it's all broken down, I mix it in with the garden soil. The compost gives the soil extra nutrients, which helps the plants grow. It's kind of like the circle of life. I save all the peels and ends from the produce I eat, turn them into compost, and use that to grow more stuff. So the garden really provides its own nutrients for the next crop of plants that grow there.
Wow, that's amazing.
Reminds me of the worm bucket my third and fourth grade teacher had.
Honestly, everyone should be doing this. It's a big part of reducing waste.
It's like a big, friendly leaf monster. Nom nom nom.
She fed the last of the garden waste into the mouth of the bin, then patted the top of it as though praising a good dog. I nearly snorted with laughter. She was too pure for this world, really. For a few moments, we stood together admiring the garden. It looked so clean and healthy now. Then, with a twinge of anxiety, I noticed how close we were to one another, how closely we'd been working. But it was probably fine. She seemed healthy, more than healthy. She was handling her injury remarkably well. Was that so-called power of positive thinking at work? Never mind. I lurched backwards, looking at her in horror.
Are you feeling sick?
No, sorry. It's just my throat is dry. I'm really thirsty.
Oh, right. We'd been working for a while, and now that she mentioned it, I felt pretty parched too. Phew.
I'll go get us some water.
I dipped inside, took a few deep breaths, and went to fill up a couple of stainless steel water bottles. Everything was fine. Her temperature had been normal from the get-go. She had no fatigue, no symptoms of the virus at all, apart from that one cough, which was justified. Still, it was a reminder that I shouldn't be letting my guard down. When I returned outside, I found Mallory staring up at my roof with one hand raised to shade her eyes from the intense sunlight.
What are those? They look like shields for your house.
I looked up at the roof where she was pointing.
Oh, sort of. They're solar panels. And they look like they could use a sweep, actually.
Why? What are they for?
They absorb energy from the sun, turn it into power for the cabin.
What? Really?
Here. Face toward the sun and spread your arms out.
She hesitated, then raised her arms up. She closed her eyes and tilted her head so that the sun lit up her pale face.
Feel the warmth? That's energy from the sun. Or, as I like to call it, the nuclear furnace that sits in the sky, 150 million kilometers away from us. The solar panels take that energy and convert it into electricity. That current makes its way down to a charge controller, which turns the current into voltage for the batteries. My computer, appliances, and lights are all modified to run off that DC voltage. Oh, and the charge controller is hooked up to a battery that can store all that incoming energy. So we can still run the power for a while, even when the sun has gone away.
I hoped my explanation made sense. For someone who'd never seen solar panels before, the concept might be a hard one to grasp.
So you capture the sunshine and turn it into energy? Isn't that like what flowers do?
Yeah, that's one way of thinking about it.
The twinkle in her eyes had returned. She continued to gaze up at the panels in awe.
It's like magic. We had something like this where I grew up, then citywide power outages wouldn't have mattered so much.
Her smile faded a little. Suddenly, the conversation felt heavy. I wanted to ask her to tell me more, but I was afraid.
Give me a few minutes to sweep the leaves off the roof. Then we can go say hi to the hens.
Ooh, okay.
They're over there, just FYI, in case I happen to fall to my death or something.
What?
Don't worry. If that happens, you can just bury me in the garden. My corpse will give lots of nutrients to the soil.
She gasped, clearly horrified, and I couldn't keep a straight face anymore. I left.
Don't kid around like that. It's not funny.
Sorry. I'll be back in a few.
See, that's my type of humor, though. I say that type of stuff all the time, which is not actually a healthy thing to do, mind you. I grabbed my ladder and broom from the shed and headed up onto the roof. I swept all the leaves off the solar panels and cleaned out the eaves troughs for good measure. I paused to gaze down at Mallory in the garden. She looked so at peace among all the plants. Butterflies had gathered nearby on a patch of wildflowers, and she was smiling at them. I didn't think I'd ever seen a sweeter scene. I looked across the distant hills toward what remained of the city. That was where Mallory had come from. I had assumed so. But now that she'd confirmed it with her comment about the power outages, the thought of her living there almost hurt. Even from my rooftop, I could see how everything had fallen into disrepair. I remembered the long ago announcement that public buildings would be closing down indefinitely. Sports stadiums, movie theaters, malls, and offices had all been shuttered. Even apartment complexes and private homes had to change. People were moved and shuffled around as fences went up and shared spaces became inaccessible. Anything to keep people apart from each other, or at least in their own small safety bubbles. I hadn't set foot in the city in years, and looking at it now, I had no desire to ever set foot in there again. With a sad sigh, I turned my back on the ghost city and climbed down from my roof. I met Mallory in the garden and forced a smile.
Ready?
She seemed so excited as we made our way over to the chicken coop. For a moment, I even thought I saw a spring in her step, but then I realized it was just her limp. Was the aspirin she'd taken wearing off already? The chickens clucked with extra enthusiasm when they saw that I had company. When I opened the door to their fenced in area, some of them flapped their wings furiously, sending feathers flying and making Mallory laugh.
For as long as they've been alive, I've been alone. So they're either happy for me or scared of you. Not sure.
I pulled the gate shut behind us. Mallory was already saying hello to each individual chicken, giving them compliments and asking them how they were enjoying their morning. Then she saw the chicks, and she gasped. It, Kaede, is this you? Is this? I swear, if Kaede saw chicks for the very first time, they would probably scream babies.
Did I not mention that? Yeah, they hatched a few days ago. You can pick them up if you want.
She looked up at me, her eyes doing that shimmery, sparkly thing again. I saw that there were tears there, and I thought, oh, or hoped, they were tears of joy.
They're so cute. Are you sure I can touch them? It looks like they'll break. They're so tiny.
Funny, that was exactly how I felt about her.
They'll be okay. Just gently scoop them up into your hands.
Okay.
She carefully held out her hand. Some of the chicks came closer, investigating her, and it didn't take long before a couple of them volunteered to step onto her palms. Mallory let out a small squeak and lifted the chicks up to her face. The chicks reciprocated with their own happy peeping noises, dancing in her hands as she stroked their golden down with a single fingertip.
They're so soft. I love them.
I believed her. It was weird. I couldn't fathom loving something so easily or so quickly, but Mallory did. And I had a hunch she'd have taken a bullet for those baby chicks.
Oh, sorry about the smell, by the way. I'm used to it, so I guess I forget that coops can get pretty smelly.
I don't find it bad at all.
She continued to pet and play with the little chicks. The whole scene was just too precious.
Do you want to feed them? There's a bag of grain just behind you.
She looked over her shoulder, smiling and gently set down the chicks so that she could reach the bag. She took out a small handful of grain and scattered it in front of her. Oh, I see D is in the chat. Hello, D. I see you there. I'm waving at the camera, but my arms aren't being captured yet. I can't afford the hand tracking quite yet. The chicks started to eat, and soon the adult hens came to join them. All the chickens loved Mallory. They nibbled at her dress and danced around her as she fed them. The clucking intensified with every handful of grain becoming so loud that Mallory started to laugh.
They're so happy.
I nodded.
I try to give them a good life, even if it's only a short one.
Huh? What do you mean?
Oh no. Why did I say that? What should I say next? Answer honestly.
Well, some of these chicks will grow up into egg layers, so that we can eat things like that amazing omelet you made this morning. And others will be butchered for meat.
She stared at me, then she looked away, and those were definitely not tears of joy in her eyes, not anymore. She petted another baby chick, but this time her hand was trembling. I felt pretty bad in that moment.
Will you take care of them from the time they're little babies like this? And then kill them?
It's not like I want to. It's
Oop.
just how it goes. I need to eat, and I can't exactly go pick up meat from the grocery store.
I didn't feel like this was something that needed to be explained, let alone justified. It was how people survived. It wasn't pleasant or ideal. But just like staying away from each other to stop the spread of a deadly virus, it was necessary. Did she not get that? Why wasn't she saying anything?
I understand. I guess I just never thought about it before. It makes me a little sad.
I'm sorry, Mallory.
I'll be okay though. Thank you for bringing me to meet them.
She stood up, gave the chickens a little wave goodbye, and left the coop. I followed her out, shutting the gate behind us.
Shall we head back inside?
Oops, what did I press? She nodded as we strolled across the grass. I felt a little awkward when we went back into the cabin. There was an unhappy tension, but I didn't know if it was just me feeling guilty or something more. I tried to inject a little perkiness into my voice.
So, there was one more thing I really wanted to show you today. It's the most intricate and nerdy of all my systems, and by far my favorite.
She tilted her head questioningly.
Remember when I said I have fish? Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. The fish are actually part of a system I use to grow plants and food indoors. That way I can have at least some fresh things to eat in winter.
Oh?
It's called aquaponics, and it's really freaking cool. Come on, I'll show you.
She smiled softly, like she was charmed by the idea. That was a relief.
Okay.
That would hopefully take her mind off the chickens as long as we don't tell her we eat the fish. I found myself oddly excited to show this to her. I felt almost proud as I opened the door, revealing the dim room on the other side.
Why is it so dark in here?
I know. The purple light is kind of strange. It's because those are grow lights. Their wavelength mimics the sun and gives the plants the specific red and blue light they need. It's a way of tricking them into thinking they're outdoors. Not that plants can think.
She smiled, like she thought I was maybe a little bit funny, which lifted my spirits even higher. I followed her all the way into the room. It was something I acknowledged often, but this was my favorite place. Caring for the plants and the fish, watching them grow and change and live, gave me a feeling of connection I didn't quite get from the outdoor garden or the hens. I didn't even feel like a connection like that with other humans, no matter how many forums I joined or chats I took part in or emails I sent or received.
This is amazing.
Told ya.
I know, but I wasn't expecting so
So
much
D, if
fun.
you're able to type, can you hear the game?
So much food.
I have been having several technical issues for some reason, and when I started, the game audio was not being sent through the stream. I felt a twinge of guilt for how upset I'd been over the potatoes she burned. She walked down the rows of potted vegetables and fish tanks, murmuring hello to the fish, examining the water feeding system and the grow lights. I imagined it all through her eyes, the eyes of someone seeing something like this for the first time. It must have seemed like a mad scientist lair or something. She paused, peering more closely at one of the fish tanks.
Why are there plants growing out of the tank water?
Technically, they're not. They have their own water. It's just been cycled through the fish tank as well. That's how they get nutrients.
I pointed out the tubes that cycled the water.
It's like the circle of life, kind of. I feed the fish and they produce waste, which contains ammonia. That gets converted to nitrites and then into nitrates, which the plants can use to grow. These tubes carry the tank water up through a filter. The filter traps all the bits of waste and gunk that won't help the plants and lets the now nutrient-rich water run through and into the plant pots. It's all a careful balance, everything working in harmony. If I feed the fish and keep the filters clean, then they're able to take care of my plants for me.
Mallory watched the fish swimming lazily back and forth, her face filled with wonder. I grabbed the container of fish food and held it out.
Here, feed them. Just take a bit and sprinkle it in.
I smiled at her encouragingly.
Okay.
She took a pinch of fish food out of the container and gently sprinkled some flakes into the tank. The fish swam excitedly toward the flakes, opening and closing their mouths. Mallory smiled and gave them some more.
They're really hungry. And looking at them was peaceful.
Fish are absolutely peaceful. I used to have a fish tank. It only had one fish in it. And a lot of snails. A lot of snails. Like, we only bought one snail, but that snail gave birth to hundreds of snails.
Yeah.
I watched her watching the fish, and I imagined showing her how to set up a system like this from scratch. I imagined us doing it together, planting the seeds of her favorite flower or a special fruit she'd never tried, celebrating the first bud and the first harvest. Mallory startled me by asking very suddenly.
Who taught you all of this?
She was too close. I took a step back and bumped into some shelving behind me. I could feel my face warming up.
Well, my parents used to take care of their plants sort of like this when I was young. And then I taught myself a bunch more by reading or by trial and error.
She shook her head a little, her gaze fixed somewhere far away.
My family had nothing like this. And there was one grocery store in our neighborhood. We would have to wait in line for ages, and then the shelves would be practically empty. We had to scrounge and make do with food that was either spoiled or just plain not enough.
Ah,
All these systems we use. If we could have had something like this, then maybe.
my stomach felt tight. This was it. She was opening up. She was finally going to tell me where she'd come from, what kind of life she'd had, maybe even what she'd been doing out in the rain that night. I didn't feel ready. Why was my heart beating so fast? She looked so somber as her mouth came open, hesitant. And then she said,
I love that you wanted to show me all this stuff.
Nothing! Fun is a figment of your imagination! She nudged me and gave me a cheeky little smile. Okay, so much for that idea. I forced my own smile, averting my eyes.
Yeah, I know. All work and no play. Yada yada. How about this? Let's go make some tea, get something to eat, and I'll show you my video games.
She nodded, suddenly grinning just as brightly as she had been that morning, as if that day had brought her no sadness at all. She said goodbye to all the fish and went back onto the brightly lit hall. I followed and closed up the room behind us. We ended up spending most of the afternoon playing games on my tablet and snacking. When I showed Mallory my favorite retro game, the idle clicker with just the right balance of dopamine inducing rewards, she told me she'd played it before with her sister when they were children. Please be a Crush Crush reference. I will be exceptionally upset if they didn't self plug their own game. She was so excited about this, and once again her enthusiasm was infectious.
I used to hold the record for fastest speed run of this game, you know.
You did not. There's no such thing as a speed run of a clicker game, and if there was, that record would be held by a bot.
We teased each other like that, laughing and sharing little meaningless anecdotes, and I didn't notice her shifting closer to me, getting more comfortable. We were too comfortable. A comfortable silence took over. Then Mallory leaned against me. Too nervous to move, I looked down. Her eyes were closed. She was falling asleep. For some reason, I let her stay there on my shoulder. I studied her. The ornate brooch she wore on her sweater dress, the cute pin she wore in her silky hair, her creamy skin and narrow shoulders, the plunging white-laced bra. My throat tightened up. This was not okay. Slowly, with deliberate care, I slid away from her. I used a throw cushion to lower her onto the couch, trying my best not to wake her. I placed a blanket over her. She continued to breathe deeply, in and out, unmoving. According to my clock, it was only just past 7. I was surprised Mallory had fallen so deeply asleep already. She looked like she'd been there for the rest of the night. Maybe I shouldn't have let her help with so many chores, I thought. But then, I was getting pretty sleepy too. I crept into the kitchen and as quietly as I could, made my nightly cup of herbal tea. We'd snacked all afternoon, so I wasn't hungry, but that cup of tea before bed was an absolute must. Carefully, I carried my bug upstairs, settling in so as not to disturb Mallory. It wasn't long before I was dozing off, tea only half gone. My body had been warmed by the fire, which made it all too easy to drift to sleep. That night I dreamt of the chicken coop being empty. There were only traces left behind of the hens, and their feathers were scattered everywhere on the ground. Coyotes must have spirited them away, my dream brain thought. I remember pocketing one of the feathers and walking around the woods in search of them. It was a very strange dream, unlike any other I had had before. Chapter 5, Maturation. So yeah, I'm invested, but I'm waiting for the twist. We're gonna in most Otome games that start off this happy, this bubbly. There's gonna be some sort of twist that will wrench out your heart. So she's either going to be dying or she's gonna disappear. Honestly, she's probably gonna be dying or have some sort of mental breakdown. And we'll see how that goes. I am both looking forward to it and not looking forward to it. Because at some point we're gonna reach decay, which I'm certain is a chapter name. Because we're doing it's plant terms, you know? I woke up to the sun shining at an unfamiliar angle through my bedroom window. I checked the time and realized I'd slept in, not by much, but still. Weird. I decided I must have needed the extra sleep. I knew stress could drain the body's energy, and yeah, I'd been stressed over the past couple of days. But the house smelled amazingly again, and my stomach clenched and unclenched in hunger. There was nothing, absolutely nothing to be unhappy about. I got out of bed, got dressed, and made my way down the creaky staircase. Something struck me as I reached the bottom step. The chairs were tucked in at the table, the blankets were neatly folded on the couch, and I was pretty sure the floor had been swept again. It all made me feel so much calmer than usual. I never knew how much my home's cleanliness could affect my mood.
Morning, sleepyhead. Your breakfast is waiting.
I turned around. Mallory was standing extremely close to me. I thought about stepping back, but then I forgot because her cheeks were flushed red, and I was pretty sure mine were too.
Good morning to you too. First things first, though.
Temperature check? Yep, temperature check.
Oh, right, of course.
Yep, temperature's still normal. We're good. Mallory danced away from me, then spun back around. Suddenly, there was a large plate of food under my nose. I grinned.
It isn't much, but I thought it'd be good to have a high-calorie meal since we both worked so hard yesterday.
It didn't seem possible, but the breakfast looked even more incredible than the one she'd made yesterday. The plate held a rainbow of foods: sliced red strawberries on a tower of golden pancakes drizzled with the amber syrup, a stir fry of rice with orange and yellow peppers, surrounded by fresh, crisp, glistening greens, and a perfect soft boiled egg. My mouth watered. She's certainly come a long way.
I did use the last of the eggs in the fridge to make this. I hope that's okay. I went out to check the fridge for more, but there were none.
I had already grabbed the plate and started eating. Through a mouthful of pancakes, I mumbled an incoherent reply to her and shook my head up and down.
Sometimes it takes them a day or two, but we'll have more eggs soon.
Shoot. What? Can I go back? What did I press? She smiled and sat down across from me with her own plate. She ate her breakfast with far more elegance than I ate mine. Hold on. More options. Save in a separate file. I'm gonna have to go back and try something because I that's the second time that I've botched something. So let's. That's the leg. Skip to the next option. My hands are off the controller. Answer honestly. Skip. Okay, I didn't mess anything up there. Skip. Nope. Okay, we're good. We're good. That's a spoiler. Load. Right back there. We're good. I saw like some minor graphical issue and that made me panic. Like I thought I pressed the wrong button or made a choice. After we'd finished breakfast, I gathered up my paltry first aid supplies so I could clean and rewrap Mallory's leg. My gaze landed on the box of disposable masks tucked at the back of the drawer, the ones I'd been wearing each day when medical care necessitated getting up close and personal with her. But not when we'd been working outside or in the aquaponics room, or when she'd sat next to me on the couch while I was played my video game. I slid the drawer shut, deciding not to bother with a mask. The two of us chatted a little while I tended to her wound.
So I guess I worked you too hard yesterday, huh?
What makes you say that?
You fell asleep at like 7 o'clock last night.
Mallory flushed pink again. She didn't seem sure how to respond.
It's okay. You learned a lot yesterday, and learning is hard work. I probably went a little overboard with the teaching.
No, but I enjoyed it so much.
It made me really happy to hear her say that. Once I'd finished fixing her bandages, I got up to peer outside. The sky above us was blue, but there were gray clouds gathering in the distance. I decided to check the forecast. I stood at my desk waiting for the computer to boot up and connect to the web. Once it did, a number of notifications popped up, chiming cheerily. I followed them to my email inbox and glanced through my unread messages. One work update, a couple of newsletters, something from a coupon service I didn't remember signing up for, and of course, a bunch more hogwash forwards about the many cures my doctor didn't want me to know about. Read the spam just for fun, delete the spam. Now we're gonna save here. Read the spam for fun. Clicked open on one of the email forwards, smirking.
Hey, Mallory.
See, there was that graphical itch.
Heard about this one weird trick for removing viral toxins?
Removing them from where?
It doesn't actually say, but there's a grainy picture of someone laying what looks like lasagna noodles across their stomach. So I'm assuming it's nothing to do with that.
There we go. Good way to add some levity to things.
Yeah, you wouldn't believe how many of these I get. They're so stupid.
I closed out of the email and deleted it, along with the others. I pulled up a weather forecast.
Partly cloudy this morning, with a chance of scattered showers throughout the afternoon and overnight. And it looks like tomorrow is going to be rainy all day.
I felt like a bit of a chump for panicking about the water. I looked up at Mallory.
Maybe there'll be enough water for a luxurious bath after all.
She grimaced and giggled.
I should probably do a few things outside, though. Get the basic chores done before the weather turns.
I'll help.
I wasn't sure. I could tell she was sore from yesterday, and I was still worried about her leg. Also, why was she so insistent on doing so much?
How about you just keep me company this time?
We headed outside. The sunshine was strong, but there was a chill in the air that hadn't been present yesterday. Occasional clouds moved past the sun, casting cold shadows over the garden. A flock of geese passed over us, noisy and energized.
They're flying south to escape the coming cold. They probably have their own tropical paradise somewhere, with their own beach houses where they spend all winter sunbathing and drinking margaritas. Just kidding. Geese don't do that stuff. But wouldn't it be nice to go on a vacation like that?
Okay, so my brother just let me know that there are supposed to be voices in the game, and they are not coming through at all. So, yeah.
I don't know. I've never been on a vacation.
What is going on with this? No, that's it's not the properties for that. Hmm. Is it under advanced? Oh. Let's try this. Let's try that. Let's see if that works. I frowned, pausing to bend and pull up a stray dandelion poking out of the grass.
Maybe someday someone will figure out a way to stop the virus, and you'll be able to go somewhere amazing.
Not by myself, I hope.
No, definitely not by yourself.
We walked around the property, Mallory humming happily to herself while I puttered about, checking the well, making sure the hens were happy and fed, yanking more dandelions out of the ground when I saw them. Pretty soon, Mallory had grabbed a bucket and started pulling weeds too. It was like she couldn't help herself. I shook my head.
That's probably enough hard labor for the day. Let's go in. I need to do some work on my computer.
Oh, not just yet. Please. I'd like to enjoy the fresh air a little while longer before the rain comes.
Ah, okay. If you're good, then I'm good.
I reached down for another clump of weeds and felt my stomach flip when I saw a big black spider clinging onto the leaves I'd pulled. I flicked my hand reflexively, which sent the weed and the creepy crawling flying across the garden. Hey, Hachi, yeah, and oh, you're just now seeing Rez? Oh, yeah, I love him. He's fantastic. Look, his ears and his hair do flippies. Look at this. Whee! Since you're here, can you let me know if there is
Stay on the alert for spiders.
any game audio going through? There's supposed to be voices on top of the music, and I've been having some pretty
Oh yes, I've already met a few of
atrocious
them.
luck
They're
trying
so
to get
helpful
things
chasing
working.
off all the harmful bugs.
Of course, Mallory would treat spiders with the same kind of adoration any cuddly pet deserved. We continued pulling weeds together side by side, and I tried to keep the pace slow and casual. Despite that, and despite the heavy clouds moving in, we were both sweating pretty soon.
Phew, I am hot. I almost want to take my sweater off.
Yeah, please don't. You're almost naked. I'll get banned from Twitch if you do that. She said this with a giggle, standing up straight to stretch her back and survey the neat-looking garden. I felt myself blush, embarrassed by the suggestion and the image my mind conjured up. Let's save here. I think I can overwrite this one.
Taking your sweater off won't change anything.
I gave an exaggerated wink. She blinked at me, and I immediately wished the ground would open up and swallow me whole. It took her a moment to process the joke, but When it clicked, she burst out laughing. Her laugh made me laugh too. We were interrupted when Mallory's stomach decided to let out a high-pitched growl. She stopped laughing and clasped her hands on her stomach.
Sorry. My tummy must be hungry after all that work.
Mine is too. And I think I felt a raindrop
I can
just
hear them
now,
talking.
which
Good.
is
And
probably
yes, it's
our
the same
key to
artist.
head
It's
inside.
Pastel Mayo.
Do you want to meet me in there?
Also,
I'll
Pastel
pick
is
some
just
things to make us
so
a strawberry
hyped that
salad.
we're getting so much use out of this model that they said that if they wanted to make any... Basically, they're going to be my go-to. If they want to make any changes or if they learn anything new, they want to redo the model for free. And they are a delight. I love Pastel Mayo so much. They have been so wonderful to me. Like, I kid you not.
Wow, that sounds so delicious. I'll see you in a bit.
I'm so happy with them. A few raindrops pelted me here and there. Quickly, I hurried back inside, following Mallory's footsteps. By the time we'd finished eating lunch, the gray clouds had fully taken over the sky and rain clung in droplets to the cabin's windows.
Well, if we get as much rain as the forecast predicts, the rain barrel sure will be happy.
Those are the big containers on the side of the house?
Yeah, you're getting good at this. It's probably the #1 most important system I have here. The water those 4 barrels can hold can last a long time, as long as I'm careful with it.
No luxurious baths. No water balloon fights either, I'm guessing. Just basic cleaning, cooking, and drinking, right?
Yeah, they did a fantastic job.
Jeez, you make me sound like someone who doesn't know how to have fun.
Pastel Mayo is
You're pretty much
an
right,
amazing 3D
though.
modeler,
But you can't
and
just
I
drink
can't wait to see how
rainwater.
far they grow.
It wouldn't be safe.
Oh, you're really delayed, I guess. Well, this is exactly why I've got the little chat above my head, so you can know what I'm
Oh.
reading and when.
The water picks up a lot of things before it makes its way into the barrel. Pollution from the air, chemicals, dirt and bird droppings from the roof.
Ew.
Ew, indeed.
Yeah, it's gross. So I add chemicals to the water and filter it to make it clean and safe. I'll have to show you how all that stuff works. Cleaning the water, using the spigots.
She turned her head to look at me right in the eyes.
You're really smart. I like hearing about all the systems you use here.
My cheeks burned under the shock of her beautiful gaze and the admiration I saw in her eyes. I nodded, not knowing what else to say. After that conversation, I went to check the solar batteries. They were full, which was good. The power they'd banked would last us a few days if necessary. Then the two of us settled down in the living room. I worked at my computer while Mallory gently explored my things and eventually nestled into the couch with a booklet to flip through. It was oddly effortless, the silence and comfort that filled the room, all through the afternoon. Gradually, the sky darkened, and so did the interior of the cabin. It was probably long past time for a break when Mallory closed her book and stood up, teetering just a little on her bad leg. The character you're playing as sounds very hot.
Make us some tea?
Oh, having thirst for the protagonist. I gotcha. Okay. Well, I'm sorry to say he doesn't have an image to go with it. Not that I'm aware of.
That sounds like a very good idea. Yes, please.
If you want to ever play this game for yourself, by the way, it's on the Switch and on Steam. It's really inexpensive, and it's from some of the creators that I absolutely adore and aspire to be like. Sad Panda Studio. The game is called Cabin Fever. I stood up and went to the utility room so I could switch off the inverter. There likely wouldn't be any more sunlight for the next while. For the next while? Okay, that checks out. So I decided to reduce the load on the solar batteries and only run off DC power for the rest of the night. I heard something coming from the kitchen, like a small stifled cough. I listened hard to see if it would come again, but it didn't.
She's probably just clearing her throat.
Okay. You know what? I think I know how this is gonna go. She's gonna have the virus and is going to die, and we're gonna be very sad about it, probably.
Honey?
Yes, dear?
Bad joke. We both froze. I felt my cheeks suddenly warm. Why did you say that? Screamed my brain.
I meant honey for your tea?
Yep, you did.
Oh, I love these. I love this game. This is a good game. I felt like such an idiot. The reply had flown from my mouth before I even had a chance to think about it. Okay, I said to myself. Now salvage this.
And I was saying, yes, I will have honey for my tea. And then I was very rudely interrupted mid-thought by a deer that definitely exists and totally ran past the window.
Mallory laughed, but it was a "you're cute" kind of laugh, not an "I'm laughing at you" kind of laugh, so I felt better. After bringing over the honey and some spoons, Mallory sat by me and picked up her mug. She took a drink and made a strange little noise in her throat.
Oh, I just burned my tongue.
See, that's why I always let mine cool down for a minute or two.
I couldn't do that. It smelled too delicious to wait.
I got up and poured her a glass of cold water.
Here, this will help.
I still need to find a tea that I actually enjoy. Like, I want to like tea. I really, really do. But every tea I've tried just tastes like very lightly flavored water.
Thank you. You're
Very
so
lightly.
sweet.
After taking a few sips of water, she set down her glass and looked at me with a sad, soft smile.
So, why would someone as nice as you feel the need to set bear traps right in front of their home?
The question caught me by surprise. I didn't know she'd even been thinking about that. Of course, it seemed obvious now. She had acted far too chipper and unconcerned when the accident happened. She must have been holding back, and was just now feeling safe enough to question why she'd been hurt in the first place. I nodded slowly.
Well, I don't know who this nice person is you're talking about, but I can tell you why I have traps set up around my house. It's all because of Lola.
Ooh, is that a stalker ex-girlfriend? Do you have to defend your property from a lot of girls?
No, it's nothing like that.
I paused to take a sip of tea, taking care to blow on it a few times before drinking. For some reason, I couldn't quite look at Mallory then, though I could see from the corner of my eye that she was listening intently.
Lola was my best friend, my beautiful Bernese mountain dog. She was the family pet, really, but me and her, we had a special bond.
Oh no! I know where this is going. The dog is dead.
After my parents passed away, Lola and I took care of each other. She was a hard worker. She was by my side always, finding little ways to help me out.
I cry.
You definitely would have loved her. She had one brown eye and one blue eye.
Tea
And her
upsets your
heart was
stomach?
made of gold.
Well, okay, to be fair, what doesn't upset your stomach? You have one of the most sensitive stomachs out of everybody I've ever met.
One fall evening, I was inside working on the computer, and Lola was outside on the deck, just enjoying the cold. Bernese mountain dogs are, as the name implies, mountain dogs, and they're made to be out in the snow. She loved snow. The deeper, the better. But it hadn't snowed yet that year.
A surge of emotion came over me. I'd never told anyone this story before. I needed to pause and drink more tea to stop myself from caving to the sorrow.
Lola started barking, and I ignored her. Because she was always barking at squirrels and birds and things, thinking she was protecting our territory. What a silly dog. But this time, it wasn't a squirrel or a bird. I actually don't even know for sure what it was. But the tracks I found later looked like they might have come from a grizzly.
Mallory gasped and held her hands up to her face. I felt like if I stopped, I wouldn't be able to start again. So I just kept going.
When I realized how urgent her barking was, I ran outside.
Yeah,
But
Hachi,
she
oh
was
no.
already gone. That eerie silence is something I'll never forget. I searched for her all night and all the next
I know
day.
you have a stomach ulcer.
never
I also
found
know
her.
that you pop a lot of pain medication.
Just tracks and some blood and fur.
You have done this on you have brought
I
this
don't know
upon
if a bear
yourself.
grabbed her and took her, or if she went chasing after it, or what. I just know I've
No,
never
in
been
all
so
seriousness,
angry
what
in my
doesn't
whole life.
upset your stomach?
I was already dealing with
For
the
real.
pain of losing my
I'm
parents.
not being sarcastic. I
Now
honestly would
Lola
like to
was
know.
gone too.
In case I ever get the gall and send you an odd candy.
After that, I pulled out all my family's old traps from the shed and set them up around the house. It was too little too late, but I needed to feel like I was doing something. It never occurred to me that a human might get hurt in one, and I'm really, really sorry that you did.
I looked up to see Mallory nodding vigorously, wiping tears from her eyes.
I don't fault you at all for what happened to my leg. I was the one who trespassed in the dead of night.
Yeah, that's true.
She let out a short laugh through her tears, sniffling. I got out of my chair again to find her some tissues, and when I handed them to her, I found myself giving her narrow shoulder a squeeze.
I'm so sorry about Lola. That's a heartbreaking story.
Sorry I made you cry.
No. I'm glad you shared that with me.
For a moment, I wondered if this was it, the moment she would start to open up and share her story with me. Why had she been outside my house in the middle of nowhere in the rain at night all alone? You need a Xanax at this point because is it because of the game? Don't worry, it's been all chipper and lovely up until this point.
Okay, it's your turn.
What for?
Non-acidic
To tell
food.
me something about you. Something real. Like maybe
I wonder if I can try
what
making like a
brought you
milk
here?
candy. Like a chocolate or something to send you guys at one point. I've never experimented with chocolate before outside of fudge. Wait. Are either of you lactose intolerant? Because I can't do that if that's a thing. A look of discomfort crossed her face. She still didn't want to tell me.
Or if you're not ready to talk about that, then maybe you can tell me something else. Something more light. Please? I hardly know anything about you.
What do you want to know?
Oh, okay. Let's reminisce since we're doing memories, I think. Let's save. Favorite memory.
Tell me something about how you grew up. A happy moment or favorite memory.
She pressed a finger to her lips, thinking hard.
My favorite memory? Building pillow forts with my sister, and playing make-believe that we were airship captains flying through the clouds. We lived at the top of the tallest building on our street, which is probably what inspired our game. I remember we had this old pair of binoculars. They weren't good or anything, but we used to look up at the night sky through them and pretend
Oh,
we
that's
were looking
wholesome.
into
That's
other
a
galaxies.
nice bump. That's a nice give me the serotonin after that
Space
saddening
is super
little
cool. I
spiel.
approve.
Yeah, space is cool. I noticed the rocket ships on your wall.
I always loved the night sky. All the stars and planets and satellites. We actually lived really close to the planetarium, and it was always my dream to go there and see a show. But it got closed down when I was just a baby. My mom would always tell me that someday the planetarium would open again. And I just had to be patient.
No, that won't stop them.
I guess
Okay.
I never really stopped
So
waiting.
I will definitely experiment with like fudge or something and see if I can ship it properly and maybe send you guys something eventually if I remember and get time to do it.
Hey, I think I've been to that planetarium. I would have been really small, so I don't remember a lot, but that's kind of cool, right? But you know, we could totally go stargazing here in the mountains. There's nothing like it.
She looked away, cheeks flushing pink. She wiped her eyes and shrugged.
Anyway, I should probably let you get back to work now.
The last thing I wanted to do was go back to work. I gave her a little poke just for suggesting it.
Don't do that! I'm super ticklish!
Oh, are you? I'm sorry, I didn't realize.
Poke her again. Do it. Poke her again. Yes. Her laugh was beautiful. She squealed and kicked her feet as I tickled her sides. A playful attempt at retaliation sent her slipping off her chair, but I easily caught her and suddenly it was like our arms were around each other. We sat there on the floor, both of us laughing through our breathlessness. It was amazing, and then it was a little awkward. I withdrew my arms and got to my feet. I helped her up. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other.
I have an idea. Let me treat you to a special dinner tonight.
A special dinner? Ooh, and what would that be?
I haven't thought that far ahead yet. Give me a minute.
I thought about what sort of meal I could make from things I had in the kitchen or pantry. Truthfully, I wasn't a very good cook. I mean, I could throw together a salad or a sandwich, but that wouldn't be special enough. A thought sprang to my mind. In the pantry was a very old bottle of red wine. I didn't know if it was fancy or even good wine, but it was the only bottle of booze I had in the house, and because of that, I valued it highly. Originally, I'd intended to save it for a special occasion, specifically for the day the virus was cured. That bottle had been sitting on a shelf for many years. The hopeful note I'd attached to it, to celebrate the cure, faded and dusty. Could I open it now? Should I open it now? No, it was special, really special, and meant for a day that might not come. Wine is meant to be shared, my brain reminded me. What the hell, I'd do it. I'd share the wine with Mallory. I swished my hand through the air and gave my best pompous butler impersonation.
A most decadent helping of popped corn with truffle oil and adult beverages.
Mallory stared at me, then tossed her head back in laughter.
Dinner is popcorn and nondescript alcohol? That sounds fantastic.
While I had the popcorn going, I asked Mallory to go look for the truffle oil from the cellar.
I'm back. I think this is the right one.
She turned the bottle for me to read the label, scribbled in my own sloppy Jiffy marker. Jiffy marker? What's a Jiffy marker? And were the words of the good stuff. I nodded and motioned my chin to show her where to find the wine glasses and bowls.
So you made this truffle oil yourself?
Yeah, it's not too hard once you get the hang of it. The first batches I ever made were terrible, though. Lots of trial and error before I landed on the right mix of ingredients and timing.
She... Excuse me. All this talking's got my throat dry and I ran out of water. She brought out a large bowl from the cupboard and placed it beside me for the popcorn.
Wow, that's so cool. I think it's incredible that you've learned to do all these things.
That's just how it goes when you live on your own. If you'd like, I can teach you.
While reaching up to grab the wine glasses, she cocked her head curiously at me.
You would want to teach me?
Of course. You're good company, and it might be fun to show you how these things work.
She smiled at me and took the wine glasses over to the living room, dusting them off with her sweater as she walked. The popcorn was almost ready. Settling into the couch to watch a movie on my computer felt very different having a beautiful girl beside me. The same one who, only a few minutes earlier, was on the verge of tears. I was happy that I could cheer her up, if only for a little while. She seemed much happier with the distraction of popcorn in a movie.
Oh my goodness, this wine is the best tasting thing I've ever had in my life.
Her cheeks began to turn rosy after just the first sip. It made me happy seeing her like this, and I was glad that I could share the small gift with someone.
What sort of movie would you like to watch?
How about something with action? And romance? Oh, and some comedy too.
That's a tall order. Let me see what I can find.
Action, romance, comedy. Tomb Raider. The first one, specifically. I think that one's good. It wasn't long before we both relaxed and let ourselves be absorbed into the movie. It was a strange story about a girl from the moon who fell in love with a human. They had to overcome their differences in order to realize that they were destined to be together. There was also a moon cat that would bust out wisecracks every 10 minutes. It had Mallory roaring with laughter as I expected.
This cat, I can't believe some of the things he says.
Her laughter was infectious and soon had me joining in, despite the subpar humor of the movie.
I haven't laughed like this in so long. Oh my gosh, my stomach hurts from laughing.
Clumsily, I spilled a bit of wine on my pajama pants. The splotch had landed right on my, well, thing that rhymes with splotch. The sight of it only made us roar with more laughter. It may have been the wine causing us to act so funny, but it may have just been that we were long overdue for a good, honest laugh. Being like this with her made me feel like my old self, or rather, like the person I might have been had my circumstances not forced me to become a young hermit. I wondered when we had started sitting so close to each other. I supposed it was so that we could share the bowl of popcorn without having to reach. But in fact, Mallory was so close to me that I could feel the heat radiating. To my surprise, she didn't recoil. So there my hands sat for the remainder of the movie, too nervous to move either way. At one point I noticed her hand fall to her lap. It was resting in a way that seemed uncomfortable, with her palm facing upwards. It was honestly quite distracting. Before I could figure out if she had left it there for me to hold or not, the movie had ended. I missed my chance.
I really enjoyed that. Thanks so much for watching with me.
Parts of it were entertaining, definitely. Like that bizarre turtle in a top hat.
right. And how we saved them from that lizard beast was so insane.
We sat together for another minute, recanting the ridiculousness of the story we had just experienced. All the windows were dark now, and Mallory looked exhausted. I felt pretty tired, too.
I guess I should get off your bed and let you get some sleep.
Oh yeah, I guess so.
Thanks for hanging out with me tonight. See you in the morning?
Definitely.
A little reluctantly, I left Mallory on the couch and climbed up the stairs to my bedroom. As I settled into the bed, I felt a strange mix of happiness and loneliness, two feelings I hadn't felt or allowed myself to feel in a long, long time. The pain of losing my family had been too much to bear, and so my heart had shut off and I just existed, going through the motions, waiting endlessly for nothing in particular. Now I was rediscovering myself, relearning what it meant to be human, and it was all because of Mallory. Then, as though she had known I was thinking about her, Mallory called up to me.
Sweet dreams.
You too. Get a good night's sleep.
I yawned and nestled deeper into my pillow before I could remember what I had been thinking about. I was fast asleep. Attention to detail and continuity. I love it. So, I mentioned I noticed the portrait of the Rockets in the background in the living room lobby scene area. And you could see it through the railing in his room. I yawned and nestled deeper into my pillow before I could remember what I had been thinking about. I was fast asleep. Attachment.
Good morning, sleepyhead.
The voice drew me up towards consciousness, but I didn't know if it was real or part of a dream. I heard a familiar creaking. Who could be walking up the stairs? I was pretty sure it wasn't me. No, I was definitely laying in bed. My eyelids were heavy and my brain was only half awake. A weight pressed down on my bed near my feet.
Wakey, wakey.
It sounded like Mallory. I teetered on the edge of consciousness, hoping I'd be left alone to fall back into slumber. The weight at the end of the bed shifted, shaking me a little. I squeezed my eyes shut.
Okay, you leave me no choice. Incoming pounce attack!
I was jolted awake then, fully this time, by the force of Mallory jumping on top of me.
Ah!
A panicked shout escaped me as I yanked the covers up past my neck, leaving only my face exposed. Mallory beamed, straddling me proudly, her clear, aquamarine eyes filled with mischief.
Oops, did I scare you? Well, you left me no choice. I tried calling you, throwing things at you, and wafting delicious smells in your direction. None of those worked, so this was my last resort for getting you to wake up.
This game
And
is
it did the
cute.
trick. You're awake now.
What kind of monster just pounces like that on a poor defenseless sleeping person?
Monster, you say? Wow, you sure do know how to give a girl a compliment.
I scowled at her playfully. I was pretty sure she was resting her whole weight on me, but she felt like nothing. And though I'd been legitimately startled and more than a little confused, I found now that I didn't dislike the situation.
If you're jumping about like this, does that mean your leg is feeling better?
Mallory looked down at her bandaged leg and then back at me. She pursed her lips.
It doesn't hurt as much, but it feels kind of weak. Like it might give out if I put too much weight on it.
I didn't know enough to know if that was normal, or what it meant. I nodded vaguely and just stared up at her, and she stared down at me, and then I shook myself.
So why did you need
And then
me
I
to
fired,
wake up
and
so
I missed.
urgently?
And then I fired again, and I missed. And I missed, and then I fired twice, and I fired 2 times, and I missed both times. And then I had a popsicle. She cocked her head.
I made you breakfast and I didn't want it to get cold. And I was worried. You're usually up way earlier than this. And maybe I was a little lonely and sort of missed you.
What did she mean by usually wake up way early? I craned my neck to check the clock on my nightstand. Oh, that was what she meant.
Damn, what's up with me? I never sleep this long.
Sometimes your body just needs a little extra rest. Okay, now...
Mallory twisted, leaned over the bed, and produced as if from nowhere a plate of breakfast.
Ta-da!
She held up the plate out, showing me the stack of fluffy golden waffles. They smelled amazing, fruity and sweet, flecked with red and drizzled with maple syrup.
My mouth is watering. I never knew that was an actual thing that happened to mouths.
Tea? Strawberry waffles from scratch will do that to you. You'll have to tell me once you taste them, but I think I may have outdone myself this time. The only thing I did make from scratch is the syrup.
That's okay. I made the syrup from scratch.
But did you make the strawberries from scratch? Is that a thing? Were you able to produce them magically from thin air?
Wait, you did?
I nodded.
There are tons of maple trees around here. I harvest their sap at the end of each winter. It's pretty simple. I drill small holes into the trees and insert what's called a spile, which is like a spout. The sap drains out through there and into a bucket. When I have enough to fill a pot, I essentially boil it down until it's mostly evaporated. Then it's syrup. And the best part is, it keeps forever, so I can just store it in glass jars in my pantry.
Mallory had never looked happier or more amazed or more beautiful.
That sounds like some kind of fairy magic.
The real magic is your cooking. This looks incredible. Although, do you mind taking it downstairs so we can eat there? I'd like to get dressed and, well,
Mallory looked down at herself in the way she was straddling me, and her face turned bright red quite rapidly. She scrambled to get off of me, nearly dropping the plate of waffles in her flustered state.
I'll do that now. Sorry. See you downstairs.
Without making eye contact, she raced down the stairs. There came the sound of cutlery being fumbled with in the kitchen below. I dragged my hand down my face, equal parts amused, exasperated, and happy. After breakfast, Mallory was quick to scoop up my plate and cutlery. I offered to help, but she said she would do them herself. By now, I had learned that there was no arguing with her, not because she was particularly stubborn, but because I caved at the slightest pushback. She made me weak, but like in a nice way. So while she cleared up, I walked to the window overlooking the garden. The skies were dark and dreary, far more ominous this morning than before. The ground glistened, and I could see little puddles on the path leading up to the door. They rippled as a gust of wind rushed past.
I guess it's another day indoors. Look how glum that weather is.
I glanced back at Mallory in the kitchen. She took a look through the window, making a little pouty face.
Also, clouds like this mean we're not getting any solar, so we're relying on what's stored in the battery bank for now. We should limit how much electricity we use today.
Okay, I'll be extra careful.
I turned back to the window and pressed my hand against it. The glass was cold, much colder than usual. If it was going to rain all day and be chilly, I should bring in some extra wood for the fire. 30 pieces should do it. Then I stole another glance back at Mallory. Mallory in her threadbare sweater dress. So thin and so short, better make it 50 pieces. I told my brain. My brain agreed. Outside, the rain was really coming down. I kept close to the edge of the cabin, sneaking along under what cover there was on my way to the wood shed. The ground was too muddy to use the wheelbarrow, so I figured I'd have to make more than one trip. I gathered up a big armload of firewood and brought it back to the cabin. I repeated this process, getting wetter and colder as I went. On my last trip to the woodshed, it occurred to me that it would never have bothered me with this much effort if it were only myself in the cabin. I would have made do with the few logs already inside, wrapping myself in blankets, and, if it came to it, suffered the cold. But Mallory deserved better than that. After bringing all the wood inside, I laid it out on the towel beside the fireplace. I always inspected the logs for bugs. I didn't want anything creepy hitching a ride inside my home. Once that task was done, I arranged a couple of logs along with some kindling and got a little fire going in the fireplace. I sat there a few minutes, stoking the flames while the wood hissed and popped. Soon the whole living room was toasty. Mallory appeared at my side and sat down. She leaned towards the fire, its orange glow warming her face. I caught myself staring at her and slapped my hands against my thighs.
Well, I better make use of this time and get some work done on my computer.
Doesn't that use up the electricity?
The computer only draws around 250 watts. A couple of hours won't make much of a difference.
Mallory stayed by the fire while I went to my desk and booted up my computer. The sound of the drizzling rain outside and the crackling fire in the fireplace soothed me as I settled into my chair. I could live like this forever, I thought. The peaceful atmosphere was interrupted by an annoying cascade of chimes from my email. I took a peek at my inbox and saw more spam, of course. Read the spam.
Wow, more new cures for the virus discovered. This says, miraculous cure found. Dihydrogen monoxide combined with pink sodium chloride will save your life. Click here now to learn. Yeah, no, that link is definitely staying blue.
Dihydrogen monoxide and pink sodium chloride. In other words, Himalayan pink salt and water. It's salt water.
And this other one has more emojis than actual words.
Mallory laughed.
You never know. One of those headlines might turn out to be true someday.
Oh, Mallory, you're such an optimist.
I rolled my eyes playfully. Without thinking about it more than that, I deleted both of the emails. Then I spent a few minutes checking some websites that were part of my daily routine. Sites for tech news, world news, and weather. A random ad for amazing delivery services reminded me about the first aid kit I needed to replace. I decided I might as well grab some painkillers too, since there had only been a handful left in the bottle when Mallory had asked for one for her leg. She seemed much better now, but still it was good to have things like that on hand. You never knew when a headache might strike or a joint might be sprained. I ordered the new first aid kit and the aspirin, and then something else caught my eye. It was a type of ad I never usually get, and certainly never paid mind to, but for some reason I did this time. It was just a basic advertisement peddling some chintzy jewelry, but something compelled me to take a closer look. After clicking through, I was presented with an image of a stunning silver ring in the shape of a bow. The color and the sparkle immediately reminded me of Mallory. I wanted to buy it. For her. Aw, he loves her! That's gonna get you in trouble in the long run in the endgame, I'm sure. I am still almost completely certain she is going to die, because that is how games like this work. I leaned back in my chair a little bit in disbelief of myself. I looked over at Mallory sitting in the living room. She had that old basket of clothing set beside her, with a little pile of things neatly refolded beside it. Her head was bent low over some garment in her lap, her fingers working away. I realized English is not my forte. I can write it, but I cannot speak it. I got up out of my seat and wandered over to look more closely at what she was doing.
Are you mending my clothes?
She brightened.
Yes, those ones are already done, and these ones here are still in progress.
I didn't even know you'd been working on this.
I'm trying to read what that box says underneath it. Is that Karu? I wonder if that's similar to Catan.
Well, normally I work on it before I go to sleep or when I first wake up. I find it sort of meditative.
You know, you don't have to do all these things for me.
I like keeping busy, and I like being helpful. Really, you've been so generous
Yeah,
and kind
it's like
taking me in like this. I just want to do everything I can to help you.
Expectations from how most stories go. And anything that starts super cheery like this and has, you know, a good upward climb in mood, then a little bit of a low to keep you grounded,
You
and then
know,
another rise
I
in
don't
high.
think I'm in the right
That's
headspace
classic
for work
story
today.
building for a huge
Luckily, I don't have
drop
any
somewhere
looming
along the line.
deadlines, so maybe I'll
So
take
I am
today
expecting
off.
something pretty unfortunate.
We could just sit and enjoy the fire together. Maybe we could play a board game.
Because it's going too well. Now,
Ooh,
I could
I
be
love
pleasantly
games.
wrong, you know?
What do you have in mind?
Sorry, yawned.
How about chess? Do you know how to play?
Surely the chess set on the game shelf would still be intact, and those old pieces would be thrilled to get some use after all these years.
Chess? Yes. I used to play with my sister sometimes. I'm probably not very good at it.
That's okay. Neither am I. I'll grab the game. Meet me at the table, okay?
I went to retrieve the chess set just where I remembered. I unearthed the box and was dusting it off with my sleeve when I heard Mallory make a little noise.
Oh,
Did you prick your finger?
What's wrong?
I can't get up. My leg's fallen asleep.
Your bad leg?
Well, at least it's only asleep and not caught in a trap this time.
Yeah. She smiled and accepted my hand to lift her up. Funny how I didn't even think twice about it anymore.
White or black?
We set the board out on the table and started setting up the pieces.
Wait, please.
I sat down on the black side of the board and finished arranging my pieces. When I looked up, Mallory was examining the box with pursed lips.
Are you missing a piece?
that way. I don't mind subbing in a salt shaker or something else to play with.
No way. We should play with real pieces.
She gave me a look. It was sort of dismissive, sort of disheartened, but I meant what I said and I knew how to cheer her up.
Seriously, I can make you a proper chess piece. And I can make it look however you like.
Mallory stared at me, one eyebrow a little higher than the other.
How?
I held out one finger and headed towards my computer.
Remember the gauze with the cute potato pattern on it? I printed that out with my 3D printer. See?
I took the equipment out and hooked it up to my computer, giving her a quick overview as I did.
This is just a small one, but it's very useful and quite simple. I just plug in the USB cable to my computer, then use a program to tell the printer what to make.
Wow, that's so cool. I'm missing the queen. Can it make that piece?
I let out a theatrical laugh, throwing my head back as I did so.
This baby can make anything your heart desires. Ask and you shall receive.
She cradled her chin while she thought.
I desire a cat.
A cat queen? All right, that works.
Can I watch?
The enthusiasm she showed left no room for arguments. I loaded up my software to search for cat and picked out a cute figurine. I set it up to print and let Mallory press the very last OK button to get the process started. Several indicator lights on the 3D printer flashed as it got to work. It started to hum and whir.
It's like something out of science fiction.
Mallory tilted her head to get a better look at the printer. She stood up to lean over and watch the cat being formed from above. The angle exposed her cleavage and bra. I tried not to look, unsure if she was aware of what her positioning was putting on display. I'd rather assume it was a mistake and not take advantage of it, no matter how attractive the sight was. We were both quiet while we waited. Level after level, the cat queen built upon itself, and about 4 minutes later, we had our replacement chess piece. I removed the piece from the printer, handed it to Mallory, and watched her expression turn from amazement to joy.
It's perfect.
And it wasn't the only thing. We sat down to play, and the conversation came so easily. We shared what we knew about chess, how we'd each learned to play, and how the game itself dated back to the 15th century, and how these days most people played it online. We talked about Deep Blue, the first computer to beat a world chess champion, and then the conversation turned to other random things. Things that made us laugh, little anecdotes from childhood, questions we had about the universe. It turned into one of those days where the time just passes you by, impossible to notice. Until Mallory sat up straight while I was contemplating my options, pointing urgently.
Hey, look! There! The clouds are breaking.
Nuh-uh, I'm not falling for that. You just want me to turn my back so you can move the pieces around. You trickster, you.
I tisked at her, shaking my head, and she laughed.
No, seriously. Look, the sun is shining over there. Can we go outside to look at it?
I twisted in my seat. Through the window, I could see the great gray sky, and there, over the mountains, a glowing crack shedding golden sunbeams down onto the land.
Wow. Okay, yeah. Good idea. And I know a perfect viewing spot.
Mallory gleefully hopped off her chair and took my hand in hers. Outside, the air was damp, and we walked together around the sides of the house to the ladder I'd used the other day. Do not climb on the roof of the house after a rainstorm. It is wet. You are asking for her to fall and die. Do not do this. That is a bad idea.
Watch your step. It's still wet and might be slippery. Luckily, the ridges help give traction.
We stood side by side, and out of the abundance of caution, and only an abundance of caution. Wait, what? We stood side by side, and out of an abundance of caution, and only an abundance of caution, I held her. The sun was on its way down, and I could tell the sunset was going to be incredible.
What do you think? Pretty good spot to watch the sunset?
Mallory took a few steps forward, leaving my hands empty. I shoved them into my pockets. For a moment, everything was quiet. I scanned the world around me and saw gray clouds streaking downward in the distance. Trees in heavy shadow with their tips lit up by the sinking sun. The ruins of the city nestled in the thriving landscape and her. She let out a long, careful sigh, turning slightly to look back in my direction.
It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
A cool wind blew past, catching her shining platinum hair and sending a few strands dancing around her head. There was something mournful in her tone, and it made my heart ache.
Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for showing me all of this.
I stared at her, wondering why she sounded so sad, yet also understanding that her sadness was the same as mine. God, she was beautiful. I stared and stared and didn't know how I'd lived so long without her. Something changed up there on the roof. I came back to myself when a strong, cold gush rushed past me, and I realized the sun had dipped beneath the horizon. I'd spent the whole time watching Mallory instead of watching the sunset.
It's already over? It happened so quick.
Yeah, it did.
Mallory had her arms wrapped around herself. I saw goosebumps on her legs, a little shivering in her shoulders.
I don't know about you, but I'm freezing. Shall we go back in?
I never paid attention before. I never cared.
She was so sad. I wanted to make it stop for her, but I didn't know how.
Maybe the most beautiful things are beautiful because they're fleeting. You have to appreciate them while they're there.
Way to fucking call me out on that game. I've got that problem. I've got that problem that I don't know how to appreciate life around me.
But
and I'm
hey,
trying so hard to fix
There'll
it.
be another sunset tomorrow.
It was getting dark now. I felt a few raindrops and the air felt heavy and sharp.
It's starting to rain again. Come on, let's go in.
Mallory turned slowly, nodding, not looking me in the eye. I stood by the ladder.
After you.
Her head was bowed and she moved so tentatively, but I couldn't tell whether it was because she was sad or because she was nervous. We've got to help her off the roof. I cannot watch her fall. No, save. We'll overwrite this save, I think.
Let me help you down.
I offered my hand. She grasped it firmly and shuffled towards the edge of the roof, turning around. She lowered herself onto the ladder slowly, making her way down one careful step at a time. I waited for her to reach the ground before I climbed down after her.
Thank you. You're like my own personal guardian. I feel like you'd never let anything bad happen to me.
That is a red flag trigger. Why would you say that? Next chapter, I bet something bad's gonna happen. Oh my god, no. No, I'm a panic now. I'm gonna panic.
Not if you could help it anyway.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know if I can help it.
Of course. I care about your well-being.
She smiled at me, and we carefully made our way back inside the house. The fire had burned low, but the inside of the cabin was warm and inviting. I felt a strange sense of calm.
It's so nice in here. I didn't realize how cold I was.
I nodded, resisting the urge to remind her about the jacket I'd offered every time we went through the door. I could tell she wasn't in the mood for me to poke fun at her. It was getting late. My stomach ached for something to eat, and I was sure she needed something too.
How about I heat up something from the freezer? And while we're waiting, we can have tea. It's my turn to make it this time.
That sounds nice.
She settled herself by the fire, gazing into the glowing embers. She seemed a million miles away. I made my way over to the kitchen and filled up the kettle. I took out a container of stew and began the process of thawing it on the stove. I searched through my pantry for a particular jar of loose-leaf tea, something I wanted her to try, and waited for the water to boil. When the tea was made, I poured Mallory's into a tacky cat mug my mother had bought at a yard sale once upon a time. I was glad to see Mallory's eyes light up when I handed her the mug.
Oh my, this is the cutest.
I thought you might like it.
I sat by her on the couch. The rain was coming down again, drumming hard on the window. We sat just listening, sipping? Yes, we're definitely sipping. Like, the tea cometh. It is the sipping. We must be ready. We must be prepared. The sipping is upon us.
This tea is super yummy. Where did you get it from?
Phew, I was hoping you'd say that. I actually made it myself. If you didn't like it, I probably would have told you it was a free sample that came in the mail or something.
You really made it? Like you grew it in your fish garden?
Yep, harvested the tea leaves myself, dried them, tested different blends.
That's amazing. Who taught you all that?
My mom did. She was a doctor. But she always had an affinity for herbal home remedies too. You know, ginger for an upset stomach, honey for a sore throat, antibiotics for an infection. When I was a kid, I didn't know there was any difference. All I knew was that whenever I was sick or hurt, my mom would whip out some drink or salve that made everything better. It was like witchcraft. She She was really the one who taught me all about plants, how to take care of them, how they can be used.
I still wish that I had a green thumb instead of this one that murders everything that's not already dead. Remembering my mother like this made my throat feel tight, brought a tear to my eye and a smile to my lips. It was the strangest feeling, totally bittersweet. Mallory's voice softened.
Your mother sounds incredible. If she was a doctor, then she probably saved many lives.
Yes, she and my father both helped save many people.
Gathering the courage to continue talking about them, I took a deep breath and closed my eyes.
They both died helping people. Until the bitter end, they tried to save as many lives as possible.
They probably died because of the plague. Mallory put her hand on top of mine. It was unusually warm, probably as a result of her holding onto the tea mug. So, Hachi, just so you are aware... Oh, Hachi's gone. Okay. Well, for everyone who's just joining in now, or if they see it in post, remember, this game is based on what will happen if no one does anything about COVID. Or what is actually happening now. I can't tell, I haven't decided yet.
They left behind a wonderful person, and you should be proud of that fact. I'm sorry that you lost them.
Hearing her kind words nearly sent me into another wave of emotions. But I managed to hold them back.
Thanks. So, is it your turn again? I've told you about my parents and my dog, but you haven't told me anything about your family.
That's incorrect. She's told you about her sister. I tried to make my voice sound light and teasing, but really I was serious. I wanted to know her. Her hand twitched, and for a second I was afraid she would take it away, but she didn't. She just stared at me, and the silence went on so long I felt I had to fill it.
Honestly, Mallory, why are you so secretive? Why can't you tell me what you were doing out in the rain that night? I want to know what brought you to me.
That did it. She pulled away and sank a little deeper into the couch, looking so sorrowful it hurt.
I'm scared to talk about it. Just thinking about it hurts so much. And I'm afraid that if I say it out loud, I won't be able to take the pain.
I get that feeling. I really get that feeling. I understand it. Yeah. That's depression. I frowned.
I understand. But if you share it with someone who cares about you, then they'll carry some of that pain too. You won't have to shoulder it alone.
And that's the eye of it.
That someone is me, by the way. In case it wasn't obvious.
She smiled softly.
I do want you to know me. To know about them. My family. Life was hard. But I loved them so much. It was just me, my mom, and my little sister. That was my bubble. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. We learned to do a lot with the little. Cooking nice meals out of subpar food. Dressing up in old worn-out clothes. Reenacting our favorite books when we couldn't read because the power was out again and there was no light. Our mom was a factory worker, so she had to go out every day to earn money for us so that we could at least survive.
We're getting
When
sad
she
again.
started showing symptoms, they sent her home. She tried to protect us. She stayed in her room, but we still went in, always trying to get her to eat or drink, giving her aspirin to keep down that awful fever. She kept telling us to stop coming in. We called for an ambulance already, but we were still on the waiting list. And what were we supposed to do? Leave her to die alone in her room? Well, she did die. My sister was with her when it happened. But I was out in the kitchen making us all something to eat.
Tear round down Mallory's cheek.
By the time it was our turn for the ambulance to come, it was only to take away a body. My sister and I, we didn't know what to do. How were we going to be able to buy food or pay for electricity? We were at the mercy of companies already struggling to produce anything. Factories in the middle of shutdowns due to waves of sickness. And it just seemed hopeless. But, we had learned about people living
I'm loving
outside the
this
cities.
so far.
Smaller
so much
communities
so far.
living off the land instead of trying to survive the old way. We thought, if that was real, maybe we should just
This
leave
is
the city
so much
behind.
more than
Somehow figure
some
out a way
fantasy
to be like those
otome
people.
could never happen.
You.
This is so much more than, like, what's that one that's gets super creepy? The one that oh, I can't remember what it was. But this is a fictional game that's real. I nodded. For a long time, I'd wondered why anyone had ever chosen to stay in the cities. Eventually, I realized not everyone was lucky enough to have inherited an off-grid cabin like I did. I couldn't imagine the impossibility of getting started from scratch. Mallory gripped the edges of her sweater dress so tightly she trembled.
About a week after our mom died, my sister gave me some laundry she just finished washing. She asked me to hang it out on the balcony to dry. And while I did that, she locked me outside. I thought it was a prank at first, but she wouldn't let me in, and I got upset. I was banging on the door, yelling at her through the glass to open up.
Okay. I think I know where this is going, so I'm gonna just put this out here. Probably, most likely, self-harm warning and end-of-life warning. So skip ahead in the videos if you get triggered by that if you're watching.
She told me she couldn't because she was sick. She'd started developing symptoms the night before, and she struggled with it all night and all morning. And finally, I begged her to open the door. She refused. She said there was no safe way for us to stay together. Our mother's attempts to protect
Okay,
us
never
had
mind.
worked.
That wasn't okay.
So my sister decided to take drastic action while she could.
My heart sank like a stone with every word she spoke.
She locked you out to save you.
So if you're fast forwarding, if you fast forwarded, go back. It was fine.
We both cried, looking at each other from opposite sides of the glass, while she begged me to go. So I did. I climbed down the fire escape and just started walking. I wandered along the river and out through the suburbs into the woods. I didn't have anywhere to go, so I just kept on going. Eventually, I was heading up the mountain.
Hang on.
Lost, and that's when I...
Hey, how's it going?
I need to turn the music down just a little bit because her voice is really soft. I shook my head completely at a loss for words. I never could have imagined that this was her tale. Even when she first came to me, bleeding and rain-drenched, she'd been bright and kind and helpful. Then I remembered the quiet little sobs I'd heard after turning my back, and the way she sometimes seemed so far away, and I wanted to wrap her up in my arms and hold her so tight that no more grief could touch her. She turned and smiled at me through her tears, and I realized how good she was at putting on a brave, optimistic face. What if she actually has the virus?
I still think that maybe, somehow my sister's okay. Maybe she called for help and they came in time and found room for her in a hospital ward, and she's fighting right now to pull through. I wonder if this was fate all along. I found you, and you taught me all these things.
Stunned by her words, I slid off the couch and knelt before her. My body acted on its own, relieved that she was safe here with me. I took her hands in mine to reassure her.
I think you're right. I think it was fate. Because as much as you needed someone like me, I needed someone like you even more.
I felt like I was drowning in her eyes. The rain was beating down outside, roaring louder as gusts of wind sent torrents crashing against the cabin. I felt this closeness with her, and I hungered for more. More talking, more banter, more laughing, more time, more touching, more everything. Through the noise of the rain, I heard the pot of stew I'd left on the stove starting to bubble.
I should check that.
Mallory wiped her tears as I got up and turned to the kitchen. The stew had thawed and heated through quite nicely, especially considering I'd left it unattended for so long. Imagine how awkward it would have been to serve her burnt food after that whole talk, snorted my brain. I brought Mallory a bowl. She thanked me. We sat and ate and talked a little, the conversation growing lighter as the cabin darkened. The storm kept on and on outside, and soon rolling claps of thunder were shaking the sky. Mallory's face grew paler as the noise grew. She set her empty bowl aside and shifted uncomfortably, eyes glistening.
It's gotten pretty late. I guess we should go to sleep.
Are you okay?
Oh, totally. I just feel a little on edge during storms, that's all. No big deal. It's really fine.
Okay. Well, there's the crank flashlight on the desk over by the door, if you feel like you need some backup light. And you know I'm just upstairs. Good night, Mallory.
I climbed upstairs, got undressed, and crawled into bed. I stared at the ceiling as rain pounded the window beside me, wind howling down over the mountain ridge. I thought about everything Mallory had told me and everything that had happened between us over the past few days. I turned off the light. Slowly, I drifted towards sleep, less and less aware of the flashes of lightning and booming thunder. I started to dream without fully realizing it, imagining that my old house cat, Fidget, I had a cat named Fidget. What are you talking about? That's creepy. A crack of thunder louder than the rest and a squeal coming from somewhere very close woke me. Mallory peered at me from beneath my own blankets. For a moment I thought it was a dream, but no, I could feel her there beside me, trembling.
I'm sorry. I lied and I'm not fine. I don't like thunder. I just get so scared. I can't help it.
Tremors in her voice were even worse than in her body. I suspected the storm had made her a little uneasy, but I had no idea she'd been fighting down this much terror. I sat up, reaching for her, my only instinct to comfort and protect. That's when I remembered I was in my underwear. Maybe she wouldn't notice.
It's okay. It's only noise. It'll be over soon.
She nuzzled into me, sniffling. Her face was red, moisture glistening on her face. Her chest was sweating and crying, She was sweating and crying, and her heart pounded so hard I could feel it through the mattress.
I don't want to sleep alone tonight.
Okay. It's okay.
I stopped short in disbelief of how much my mindset had changed. How had I gone from refusing to be anywhere near her to this? She was in my bed, and we were breathing each other's air, and I hadn't even checked her temperature.
I want to stay with you.
She whispered this, touching my hand, her eyes pleading with me. She was so beautiful. All I wanted to do in that moment was kiss her.